Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Uncle Podcast. My name is Borna, and today we have another special episode with Brendan Caulfield on the show in our technology corner. Brendan, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Borna. Good to be here in the technology corner. I didn't realize that's what this corner was, but cool. And nice to know that I make the episode special. Thanks.
Always, man. I always enjoy talking to you, and for everybody just joining in, we did a bunch of these in the past, so make sure to subscribe to the channel and check out the other episodes. Last one was really cool. Today we're doing like an update episode on one of our favorite topics. Me and Brendan love chatting about technology, and we love electric cars. He's a huge SpaceX and Tesla fan, me as well, and we also can't forget about Mate Rimac, who we mentioned also on the other podcast as well. So we're gonna give a little update on that. Brendan, how are you feeling today?
I am feeling very well, thank you. And you?
Awesome. I'm doing great, man. It was a long week, but I was looking forward to this. And sorry for everyone who's listening that we're not doing this on a more regular schedule, but me and Brendan will kick into gear and try to do it more often. All right, so let's kick it off with the big news. Everyone probably heard about it. If you haven't, this is gonna blow your mind, but Mate Rimac and Elon Musk finally met. Yes. That's it. That's what we've been all waiting for years, actually.
I'm just going to be like 60% of the podcast audience going, who rematch with Elon Musk?
Elon Musk had a rematch with someone?
If you don't know how to pronounce the name correctly, you'll probably know this guy as Mate Rimac. And know the company as Rimac cars. And you may not even have heard of that, but if you remember, Richard Hammond got in a really serious accident. And I'm sorry, I know that's probably like the worst thing that any rematch fan wants brought up, but it is the most public thing. It's like, how did Richard Hammond almost die? Oh, it was in a super electric vehicle with insane power that he completely screwed up driving.
Yeah, unfortunately, but that actually got them a lot of publicity, as you said.
Sure did.
Backstory: small Croatian car manufacturing company started by this guy called Mate Rimac, or the American version Mate Rimac. So he basically started out of his garage, started playing around with electric motors, and put together like an old BMW, and then after got funding and created Concept One, which was like a 1,000 horsepower electric supercar. And then in the recent years, he leveled it up into Concept Two, which is now the Rimac Nevera, which basically means storm. It's around 2,000 horsepower, and it is the fastest electric car in the world. A lot of people try to dispute that, but feel free to watch a lot of YouTube videos on Rimac versus whatever you type in. It's mind-blowing what this car does.
Rimac versus Google autocomplete.
I haven't seen that one.
No, I just mean that like you just stop typing there and the list of options will come up for you.
And who was faster?
Oh, that's a good question. No, it's not. It's a silly question. Let's carry on.
Sure. So yeah, basically, there was this whole like story building up of Mate Rimac being like the Croatian or Balkan Elon Musk, right? Because Elon Musk is the world famous electric car builder, although there are other electric car companies and other car companies making electric cars, which we covered in previous.
I think it's indisputable that Musk made electric vehicles sexy.
Yeah, and he's like the figure in the electric cars. Like there, like ask me now if I know anybody else in the electric car. You know, like I don't know any CEO, CTO, like nobody who's kind of working. You know, so
and I follow it probably a bit closer than you do, and I'm also drawing a blank on the other people's names. I can see a few faces in my head, but I know what you mean.
Yeah. So the only person that I knew is, I'm biased because I'm from Croatia, right? Is Mate, because the story was kind of going on for the last 10 years as he, started out of the garage and did these like races where they were dragging and he was racing other cars, and it was hilarious,
Well, just in case you didn't hear the previous podcast, and I do recommend that you go and listen to that for more detail on it. But I just thought it was so awesome that he was turning up with like a BMW, wasn't it? That he'd ripped the engine out of and replaced with an electric drivetrain. And people were like, what is this clapped out Beamer doing on this track up against sports cars and stuff? And he was just smoking them with the thing. That's so awesome.
What's this washing machine doing here with the other cars? Can I charge my phone on this? Jokes like that. And he actually wasn't beating them from the start. I think it took him like a few races, and then like it was super hard for any other vehicle to catch up with him. And fast forward now, like the myth is building, right? The Croatian Elon Musk, you know, and you see him building a company, getting more investments, growing it steadily. And everybody's kind of saying like, did Elon Musk actually notice that this company exists, right?
Yeah.
And in interviews, people started asking Mate, like, did you meet Elon Musk? Did you try reaching out to him? Did you ever connect? Did you meet him in any of the conferences or car shows or anything? He basically didn't until the 8th of March 2020.
Well, didn't he always say that like he didn't want to meet him yet because he felt like he wasn't at that level yet?
Yeah, that was interesting to me. And he said that in an interview. He said like, now is not the time. I don't think I'm still ready yet. I think he wanted to impress him by what he achieved already. You know, I think he
wanted to be like, I beat you.
Yeah, it's either or, you know. So yeah, I think this trip, I think he organized the trip into the US, into New York. And I think it was just like stuff aligned, and it was really easy for them to meet. It was some kind of a dinner, and it was during a tough time. But so Mate didn't want to talk a lot. I think the Ukraine crisis was just starting, you know, so he didn't want to brag too much about it. But it basically, they had two pictures of him and Elon Musk. One is of them standing together. Mate posted it on Facebook. And the other one is of the table napkins and letters that they got. Is like they sat them next to each other so they could chat all evening together, you know.
Somebody organizing that particular dinner was like, no kids.
Or there was just like Jay Leno, like, here's a knife, like do something with the knife, you know? He called you what? I'm actually not satisfied with how this whole thing turned out, because there's nothing on the internet. Like the audience went crazy. Everyone was like, so what did he say? What did you talk about? What are we getting, like a gigafactory Croatia? Yeah, people like, woo. Yeah.
And then the response was,
Mate's Facebook post said, and I quote, "This was fun, ... and intense, ...
Yeah. And the crowd goes, oh.
And everyone's like, what is, you know? So yeah, I tried to look into this. I went on a bunch of like news portals and Croatian English, and I found a bunch of them, but none of them actually say what happened, what was discussed. You know, everybody had the same picture from his Facebook profile. Everybody wrote the same thing, that they finally met, that everybody was waiting for that, and then it stops, you know? Yeah. The comments are great. Some of them are like super supportive. Some of them are like, oh no, like Mate is better, Elon is better, you know, like, you know how community gets kind of clashing, everyone fighting for their own side. And of course,
tribal humanity gonna tribe.
Of course.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of people voting for like a gigafactory Croatia or gigafactory Bosnia, you know. So I'm not sure how that would work, but yeah, we'll see.
By all evidence, very well. Every other one has done well.
Yeah, true. I think they're doing really, really well because they're building them in like tech centers and tech hubs where they can get a lot of talent in one place fairly easily, you know. But yeah, I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't get any more information from Mate. He didn't comment on it. I didn't see any podcast where he went in length on what happened. It might be that he's super busy right now and doesn't have the time to do it because of everything with Bugatti and Porsche and all of that happening. So yeah.
Did you tweet him and ask him what's going on?
Hey Matty,
what's going on?
I sent him a message on Instagram below the picture, but didn't get any feedback. So,
well,
yeah, maybe next
it's probably
time.
like do you remember the Simpsons? They had Ringo Starr on one week, and Marge Simpson had written a fan letter to Ringo back in the 60s, and Ringo was like responding to it now in the 90s, and the first line of it was like, "Dear Marge, please excuse the lateness of my reply." So you'll probably get that in like 10 years. An Instagram ping, and you'd be like, "Wow, do I still have that app?"
Probably, yeah, probably. Or maybe I could tweet to Elon like, "Hey Elon, can you introduce me to Mate?"
Yeah, because Elon definitely has fewer tweets to sort through than Mate Rimac.
Imagine him being like, "Yeah, sure, dude, I'll hook you up." Like next day, Mate is like, "Hey man, how's it going? Like, I heard you mentioned me on your Uncle Gold podcast. Like, what's up?"
Listen, Mate, if you appear on the podcast, you have to be prepared for the wave of additional fame you're going to get. I mean, so many more people are going to have heard of you now.
Yeah. Raving fans.
Yeah. Oceans of people.
All right. Yeah, so that's kind of the update on that. While I was looking into all of this, I tried to find some information about what they're doing with the car as well. So they've been doing a lot of crash tests lately, and there was a really intense one done where they basically crashed
the car. This is
with
Nevera, is it?
Yes, with Nevera. They crashed it sideways to see how it would behave if somebody crashed on from the side to them, or if the car itself crashed to a pole on the road. And it did actually really, really well. It passed all the crash test standards that they have, and they said that the way they built it, like super low. I don't know if you guys watched that in the previous podcast, but they basically made their battery like T-shaped. I don't know how to do it. Something like this, where the driver's seats are in between. So the bigger part, the T, the upper part of the letter is behind the driver's seats, and the straight part of the letter is between the driver's seats, right? And because of that, their seats can be a lot lower. So that's why they can get a supercar out of that. That basically allows
minimal drag, coefficient of drag, because the roof is lower and can be more or less in line with the bonnet and all that.
Yes, exactly. But also the outside skeleton of the car that's kind of holding everything together is a little bit higher than usual on cars, because the seats are lower. So that's why when the car crashed into the pole, it was kind of more safe and stronger, because the skeleton is a little bit higher, So
and is the skin of the car still carbon fiber on the Nevera, or was that
yes,
just for the concept one?
Yes, it's carbon fiber, and well, not all of it, but large parts of it. I'm not sure how big of a amount of it is in carbon fiber. I will have to look that up, but that's a really good question there.
Brendan Caulfield putting Borna Zuber on the spot since 2020.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome.
This is almost as big as the event of Mate and Elon meeting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the car. So they're trying to improve it, testing everything. They're trying to get to, upping the production levels, and the company has been growing. Recently, last year, they merged together with Bugatti, which is also a famous supercar manufacturing company. They're based out of France, so it's not far away actually from Croatia, like a few hours drive. And
you would not expect a company called Bugatti to be based out of France. Like, that's such an Italian name.
Yeah, it really does sound Italian, but they're French based.
How do they even pronounce that? Bugatti.
Probably. We would have to get a French speaker on the podcast to really get the feel for it.
And he'd be like, "No, the Gatti is silent. It's just B."
The whole world pronouncing it wrong. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, actually. That happens a lot. Rimac.
Indeed.
Yeah. So yeah, they're working on their Rimac campus. That's also mentioned in the previous podcast. It's a new facility they're building out, basically the Croatian version of the Gigafactory, right? It won't be as big as Elon's factory, but it's something state of the art. I don't think we have anything like that in Croatia or these parts of the world. It's going to be, state of the art. They're going to have everything.
That's part of the reason why Rimac is so exciting for Croatia, though, isn't it? That like the Croatian economy has never been super strong. It's sort of, I don't want to mischaracterize it, but like you had the war back in the 90s, and I imagine it took a long time to restart the economy after that and get big business going. And I get the feeling there was kind of a lack of enthusiasm coming out of that.
Yeah.
And so Rimac is kind of a ray of light, isn't it, for Croatia?
Yeah. I always had a feeling that let's call it salvation, quote unquote, would come from outside, like international companies stepping into these regions and being like, look, this is what we do. This is how it's done properly. Yeah. Learn from us. And that would raise the economy.
Like, hi, we need stuff done. You guys are relatively cheap compared to other developed nations.
Exactly.
And go do it for us, which is not the most inspiring story, but for a dude in Croatia to just come out of the gate with incredible technology and spin this company up to the point where it can absorb a globally recognized brand with the help of another globally recognized brand. That's just so inspiring. So that you guys must be so thrilled with that.
People love him, and he really is an inspiration because usually there's a idea that like all companies are corrupt, and you can't do anything or grow your company larger if you're not corrupt yourself, right? And I think he's just done it through like hardcore work ethic and like pushing through and basically raising the quality of the car so high that it transcends from a national level to an international level, And
I feel like that's part of the reason why he's compared so much with Musk, because for all of the criticism and flack that Musk gets, and some of it is very well earned, I certainly don't really think that he could be corrupt, and I don't think that he has corrupt motivations for doing what he does. I think that that's why people see the similarity between Rimac and Musk, and that's why I would have loved to have heard their conversation, because the philosophies that drive them both must be really interesting to compare and contrast.
Yeah, I would love.
I was actually when you said that we'd be talking about this and the difficulty that, like, I went and looked it up as well and couldn't find anything. I didn't do any kind of exhaustive research on it, but I just wanted to see, was there any video of the event or anything? And I think you had mentioned that it was difficult to find out what was said between them. And I was sort of half expecting you to come out and say, let's role play. Like, I'll be Mate Rimac and you be Elon Musk. And I was like, it's as stupid as it was. I was like preparing myself to be like, tremendously paradigm
orders of
order of magnitude. Yeah, exactly. I think it's tremendously important to understand orders of magnitude.
Meeting Mate Rimac is essential for bringing humanity to a multi-planetary species.
I think it's important to have a bright future to aspire towards, and having dinner with Mate Rimac at least once a week is an exciting future.
Oh man, personally, like, two things that would extremely surprise me. One would be if this became sort of a partnership. I don't think that will ever happen.
No,
I don't think they would ever work. Like, I don't feel that there's any hate or beef between them.
No,
I feel
but
just
they're
like
too individualistic.
Yeah.
Certainly Musk.
Just, like, both of them want to do their own thing and just run with it.
Yeah, and I think that Rimac has a different target in mind compared to Musk. Musk has this sort of global consciousness thing, or conscience rather thing, where he wants to accelerate the transition to renewable energy, and part of doing that is to eliminate the emissions from transport, and essentially combat climate change. And that's very sort of highfalutin and high-minded, and I don't think Rimac is pursuing this for that reason. I think, in his own words, like he still loves internal combustion engine cars. It's all about the power and the technology and the speed and the intricacies of that. That's what fires him up.
Yeah.
And while like Musk obviously appreciates all of that as well, his primary motivation is to kind of make a change in the world. And I don't want to say like one is better than the other. That's not where I'm going with that. I'm just looking at what motivates the two men. And so I don't think they could get along well in a partnership because they'd be pulling against each other.
Yeah, yeah. I maybe failed to mention that in previous podcasts. I honestly don't remember, but I feel Mate has that also in the back of his head.
Oh, yeah?
It's just not as big of a priority for him.
Yeah.
I know that in one interview he mentioned that in the new campus that he's building, the cafeteria restaurant that they'll have inside for all the employees will be looking at a field where they will have sheep walking around, and he's a vegetarian. He's like, I'm not pushing anyone to become vegetarian, but you will have this lovely little sheep running around while they're eating, so to remind you that you don't have to. Plus, and then he throws like a fact on how much CO2 is produced on a yearly basis because of meat consumption. So I think he knows all the facts behind it, but it's hard to say, oh, you're going to change the carbon footprint of the world when you sell like 100 supercars, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you're producing mass production cars like Tesla, then you can really impact on a larger basis. And it's just a different play.
And Rimac isn't all about supercars, are they? They're about technology generally. Supercars are kind of a way to demo that and to get the ball rolling and get publicity, but they're about partnering with other companies and producing technology that they can use. Isn't that the case?
Sure. So what basically happened last year is they got the second big investment from Porsche into Rimac, and together they are now joined with Bugatti, as we mentioned earlier. And now their mission, I also think that Hyundai has, Hyundai has 11% in this whole thing. And
that's interesting.
30% are other investors, and then 22 is Porsche, 35 is Mate. So that's approximately
that's
how
really
it goes.
Interesting that Hyundai is on board, because they have been themselves and Kia, basically the Korean, if I'm not messing that up, Korean, right? They're Korean. Yeah. The Korean big hitters in the auto industry, they have been super forward, if that's the right way to put it, about electrification. So you've got the likes of the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and the Kia EV6, which are on our roads now. I just saw an Ioniq 5 today. Those are really, really good cars. And I just love...
Are those the one where they already changed the logo of Kia?
Yes, they have.
I think it's a little bit different, right?
It is, yeah. The EV6 is really striking looking. I'm not crazy about its looks, but the two companies share a lot of the back end anyway, in terms of business and technology. So the excuse me, the drivetrain and battery packs are pretty much the same machines between the EV6 and the Ioniq 5. I just happen to think the Ioniq 5 is a beautiful car, and the EV6 is a bit strange looking. But sorry, this is a big tangent, but the fact that they are involved, I didn't know that. That's really interesting and good to hear, because it means that they are going to benefit from cutting edge technology because of that partnership.
Yeah. I think so too. Just to finish on your rant there, I'm looking at both cars, and we're gonna put the pictures there on top so everyone can see it watching on the YouTube channel. I actually like both cars, how they look. The Ioniq kind of reminds me of a BMW. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe because of the square lights.
It's a little bit Land Roverish as well, in the sort of the composition of it.
Yeah.
And it looks smaller than it is. It's quite a large car.
Oh.
But I just really love the little details in it. There's like a pixel arrangement in the lights. They're perfectly square. There's lines and stuff. It's just got a real funky feel to it. Not funky, actually, nerdy. very nerdy,
Hmm.
and that's what appeals to me.
Cool.
Also, the interior is like an editor's desk in a TV studio. It's like a flat dash with a bank of screens across it, and a steering wheel. It's very functional, but very clean and smooth. And I really, that tickles my things.
Your interests.
That's it. That's what I was talking about.
Yeah. It would be great if in the future we could get like like, you know, well, basically we're going there, like a gaming car where you could sit down and like play full on console mode while
dude,
driving.
Tesla already does that. You can, and I think actually video games were recently enabled for full self-driving. I'm not 100% sure about that. That's coming down the track very soon if it's not already available for the full self-driving cars in the US, where you can actually play a game while driving. Yes. And they have quite a catalog of games there. I can't remember any of the more recent releases, but there's like Cuphead, which is this indie game with a kind of cult following. They have this racing game, bunch of old arcade classics, and as I say, more recently there have been like notable console releases also going to Tesla, which is bonkers.
Yeah. I think we're going to see more of that. Like, I think,
and the cars need all of that grunt anyway, because they have to be able to interpret the road that they're on. So like running a game on that hardware is trifling. It's not a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Gaming in cars, it always seemed like for longer drives that it's kind of useless to sit around and just wait. It's hard to be productive, like writing down stuff or reading, because everything is shaking, you know. But with games, you kind of don't lose on quality if it's shaking a little bit, you know. So
yeah,
the future is bright, Brendan.
It's kind of interesting to note that. Yeah, we're breaking up, are we?
Really?
Oh, you did for a moment there. I didn't catch what you said. I'm sorry.
I said the future is bright, Brendan. We'll be in cars gaming all the time.
All I heard was burn.
All right.
Looks like
we're back.
We're back.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. That's it. Yes. Cut. Yeah. So just to finish off the topic that we were talking about earlier. So Rimac together with Hyundai.
I have always said Hyundai, but I think it's properly pronounced Hyundai.
In Croatia, we pronounce it Hyundai.
Yeah, well, it sounds right to me. Yeah.
All right. So
I've heard Koreans say it, and they say Hyundai.
Hyundai. All right. Let's go with the Korean version then. Hyundai, Porsche, Mate Rimac, or his company Rimac Automobili, joined with Bugatti. Now there will be the main strategy is to have it separated into 3 companies based on production and what they're doing. So the standard one, or the one where it started, was the Rimac Automobili, which will be focusing on the hypercars that we mentioned earlier, producing them. Then we have Rimac Bugatti. That's the French office that they're acquired and joined forces together. We'll be focusing on Bugatti production. And then we have the third branch, which is Rimac Technologies. Mate said repeatedly in interviews that they are not just a car company, they are a technology company, because they manufacture a lot of parts, batteries, designs for other vehicle companies. So with the new campus, they want to increase that part a lot. And they want to have the approach like, you bring us the idea, we'll get it done from start to finish. And I think that's very attractive for a lot of other companies that don't maybe have like a motorcycle division, right? Rimac can supply them for that. They don't have like a battery division. Rimac can help them with that, you know. So I don't have all the details what they're exactly doing, but I'm sure that we'll cover that in one of the future episodes, because I think that's also an interesting part, and that can be also very lucrative in my opinion. Wasn't it Henry Ford who said, yeah, you sell the cars, I'll sell the parts for them, or something like that?
Maybe, I don't know.
That could have been in an older era where you needed to repair something all the time.
I do know that Henry Ford also said that you can have any color you want as long as it's black. Referring to the Model T, because the assembly line process, they just had one color of paint on the assembly line.
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's hope that we don't get that with like, how Apple used to have only like black and white phones, and that was it. Let's hope that there's not a car company that only limits us to only one or two colors.
Well, I do think that Ford may have diversified their paint color availability a little bit since then.
Yeah,
I'm not certain, but I think I've seen Fords of other colors.
I think I have too. Maybe they didn't. Maybe just people pay extra to paint them on their way out.
Yeah, there's just this massive aftermarket like respray industry for Fords.
We should Google like how much does Ford respraying cost, and like YouTubers making millions by starting a Ford respraying business. Like, I could totally envision that, man.
I like the way your brain is always on like, where's the opportunity in this? Where's the opportunity in this bonkers stupid comment? Like,
I have a friend in Croatia. He kind of thinks like that all the time as well, just like me. And we would be just like walking down the street, and like you're finishing a sandwich, and you throw away the bag, and there's like, why do I have to lift off this to throw the bag into the bin? Like, why isn't this automatic? Why are we not like scanning our retinas and then it lifts up automatically? Or you just wave your hand and then we just look at each other and we're like, dude, we're gonna do like super advanced trash cans and make millions on it. Yeah.
Or a foot pedal.
No. it's not a dude will make millions idea moment.
Okay.
That's like super practical. That's like your clips on
you have to you have to be able to sell the data from the retinal recognition,
of course,
obviously.
See? Like,
that's it.
You can't sell footprint data to anyone.
Or can you?
Or Brendan, we install trash cans that scan your shoes and send basically information to shoe companies like Nike, Adidas, and all of these.
And they cross-reference with trash cans in other areas to generate foot traffic heat maps for local retailers.
Yes, and then they build shops around trash cans where there's
and the bias in that data is like totally towards fast food places and anywhere that sells anything disposable. So I don't know how that would shake out, but interesting thoughts.
Yeah, the future is data.
Yeah. So anyways, he's played by Brent Spiner on Star Trek.
I got that actually. All right, cool. So that kind of covers everything that I wanted to cover with the whole Rimac's story. I'm going to switch it over to you, Brendan. Sure. What do you got for us in store for this episode?
I have a Tesla update. I mean, we're talking about Elon Musk and Rimac's, Mate Rimac's meeting. We're talking about what's happening with their respective companies. And Tesla just continues to chug along, kicking ass and taking names. It's not all a bed of roses, though. There's some areas in which they seem to be consistently lacking. And so I'll get the negative stuff out of the way up front, and then we go into sales numbers and how their factories are doing and everything. But like, I've seen a lot of people who would have been, if not Tesla fanboys, they would have just been historically very, very positive on Tesla stuff. And people who would have bought multiple Teslas with the proceeds of their highly successful YouTube channels, for example. And they start to get they've started to get very circumspect about talking about Tesla now. And the main reason for that is that there's just story after story after story after story of Tesla customers who are getting a really rough treatment from their customer support and service department. It just seems like there are not enough resources being thrown at that department to actually treat the people who have made Tesla as successful as it is with the respect that they deserve. Like there was an example I heard of someone who got a brand new Tesla Model S Plaid edition, which I think may have only come out since the last podcast that we were talking about, which is the new upgraded version of the Model S, which is their not their largest car, but sort of second largest. It was the first mass market, if you can say, is, you know, car that starts at 70 grand is a mass market car, but mass market luxury car, I suppose you should say. Mass produced luxury car, that's a better way to put it. It was their second car overall. They did the Tesla Roadster, which was a limited edition two-seat sports car. Famously, Elon Musk's very own Roadster is now orbiting the sun, out at about the distance of Mars, circles from Mars to Earth and back every 2.5 years or so. But yeah, nuts, absolutely nuts. And the yeah, so the Model S first started selling in, I think, I'm going to say 2013, but maybe it was earlier than that. Maybe it was 2011. It was an odd numbered year, I know that much. No, it was 2013 because, yeah, the Nissan Leaf started selling in 2011. That's what it was. Anyway, so Model S has been selling for that length of time, and up to probably last year, it was still true to say that a 2013 Tesla Model S was better than any other electric car on the road. Now, there are competitors that it could be said are comparable in terms of like the competence of the vehicle and the user experience, but they're not as good looking as a 2013 Tesla Model S. They're not as sexy, and they probably don't have the same acceleration, although I'm not sure about that part. But you have stuff like the aforementioned Kia EV6, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and a slew of others. I couldn't possibly list them all off. But the point is that the market is catching up finally with a car from 9 years ago, which is an impressive statement of Tesla's lead. And they haven't sat on their laurels, because even a 2020 Tesla Model S was leagues more advanced than the 2013 Model S. They kept on updating the car. And the latest update to the Model S, and indeed the Model X, has been called the Plaid update, which, if you're a nerd who knows their comedy movies, you might get the references to Spaceballs there. In Spaceballs, the spaceships would go to hyperspeed, and then they'd go to like extreme speed, and it would keep going up and up and up until you hit ludicrous speed, and then they accelerated a little bit further, and one of the characters is like, "What's past ludicrous?" And they're like, "Those insane bastards, they've gone to Plaid." It was this ridiculous thing where the spaceship shoots off into the distance, leaving a trail of like a plaid rug pattern behind it. Yeah, so Plaid is the name of the update. It takes a lot of explanation. Anyway, along with the upgraded performance and battery life and motors and so on, which would be the normal upgrades for the Tesla Model S and X and any Tesla as they improve the cars during production through the lifespan. The interiors, and to a lesser extent the exteriors, got a much needed, or long overdue anyway, update. And so the interior of the Model S and X are now a little bit closer to that kind of minimalist look of the interior of the Model 3, but with a few twists on it. So where the Model 3 has standard steering wheel with no binnacle behind it, showing your like speedometer and all that kind of stuff, all of that on the Model 3 is placed on the center console screen. And I'm actually even miming a left-hand drive car here, which is strange because I live in a right-hand drive world. But with the Model X and S, with the new refresh, they still have the binnacle, but they keep the clean lines, or they take the clean lines from Model 3. They also take the center console screen being a landscape orientation, which it is in the Model 3, and in classic Model S and X, it was a vertical, a portrait orientation. But the biggest and most controversial change, debatably, is that the steering wheel is gone. It's not a
What?
steering wheel anymore.
What?
It's a yoke. It's like a fighter jet's
Ah, nice.
control thing. So it's this like rectangular device with handles on either side, and it turns. It's a wheel by any other name. It's basically missing the top and bottom of the wheel. It's just the center part of it. But
How will it be ever, like able to do the cool drive mode?
yeah, the wife beater
Yeah.
pose.
With your one hand
Yeah, out
outside.
the
Yeah.
window. Well, you can do it, but you'd have to turn the wheel 90 degrees and you'd be doing donuts then. So um, I don't know. Yeah, I guess they didn't think about that demographic.
A lot of people will complain about
Yeah,
it.
and they have. Oh, they have. Another thing that they streamlined there, and it's one of these things that kind of goes into the negative column, but it's more like a finicky detail. But they have removed if you've ever driven an American automatic car, uh, I think particularly if it's produced in America, we here in Europe wouldn't be used to this, where you change driving mode in an automatic car with something that's in the position of a manual gear stick. It's like there, and again, I'm miming to the right, but anyway, it's where a gear stick should be, and it's got your drive and your neutral and your reverse. All of that is on a stalk on the steering wheel column in an American automatic car. It's
Okay.
not something I particularly realized until fairly recently in my life. But so that's why you see people doing that when they're changing gears in American
Yeah.
cars and TV and stuff. That's what they're doing. That stalk is gone, and there isn't anything down in the gear stick location either. What happens is that the car looks at its surroundings and decides what direction you're likely to want to move when you press the accelerator, which sounds crazy, but actually in practice, in most situations, it's perfectly obvious which direction you'd need to go. And it puts it up on the screen what direction it's going to send you in, and there's an override on the screen so you can change that if necessary. But that is a bit of a strange one. Stuff like the left and right indicator, all the stalks are gone, by the way. It's just the steering column and the yoke. All the
Whoa.
stalks are gone. All of the other controls that would generally be on stalks are either on touch screen or touch sensitive panels on the steering yoke, or on the screen. So there's some controversy in that. Takes a little bit of getting used to. Yeah. All of this is because I was giving in an example of the poor customer service, right? I was explaining what the Model S is, what the latest update is. And so that latest update is the Plaid one. It's called Plaid because it's insanely fast. It is, I think this one achieved 1.92 seconds, 0 to 100 kilometers. 1.92 seconds. That's sub 2 seconds. When and this touches on another reason why people are a little bit disappointed with Tesla these days, but when the 2020 Roadster was unveiled in that big event like 4 years ago, when they were showing off the Tesla Semi, you remember, and the presentation finished, and then the lights didn't quite all go down, and then they came back up, and then the Tesla Roadster, the new version, drove out of the truck, and it was really sexy looking and
Yeah.
insanely fast, and they took people for test drives on the runway outside because the facility's at an airport, and that thing is a 1.9 second 0 to 100 kph, and at the time the auto trade press was like, what?
Yeah.
You cannot get sub 2 seconds 0 to 100 kph. That's not physically possible. The tires will tear and all of this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and
reality will bend. We'll get time travel.
Like
Morty.
But apparently they did have to do some kind of wacky, crazy material science on the tires for these cars. But now it's on a production model car, so I don't know how that's even possible. And it's on like a production model sedan that can seat 7 kids if you get the extra seats in the boot. So that's crazy. That's mind blowing. And I think these Plaid cars are like 150 grand or something like that. I didn't look into the price, but they're crazy money. So anyway, the example I was going to give, someone paid that money and they got the full self-drive package and everything, and they were super excited, as you would be, about your car coming in. And they got in the car, they tested it out, it was really, really cool. And when they turned on full self-drive, nothing happened. And it threw up error messages. So they're like, oh, and they called up Tesla service, explained what happened. They were like, okay, yeah, we'll book you in, bring in the car. And so they brought the car in, they got a replacement car, I think. And then time just started to go by. And it was like 1 week, what's going on? We haven't been able to fix it. Long story short, it dragged on for like 4 months where they didn't have their car. And at the end of it, they were like, you know what? Screw it. I want my 100+ grand car back. I don't care that it can't self-drive.
Yeah.
I'm going to cancel my my self-driving subscription, because it's a subscription service, and I want a refund for that aspect of the car because I never got the product.
Yeah.
Which seems perfectly reasonable. And they were like, no, we can't do that. And we're charging you for the 4 months of self-drive subscription that you didn't get to use because we had the car for that length of time. So there's like lots of stories that are like that, where they're just being arseholes about it. Like they're not doing good service. Availability of appointments and stuff is few and far between, and people are waiting for ages. There's all sorts of stuff. So there's that. There's the other issues, like, as I mentioned, the 2020 Roadster, as it was known, is nowhere to be seen. It's still in development. Likewise, the Cybertruck was supposed to... Sorry.
For future podcast listeners or our 80-year-old selves, it's 2022 right now. So
yeah, exactly. So that 2020 Roadster is not exactly 2020 vision right now. But sorry, it was terrible.
I loved it.
Oh, good. The Cybertruck has been announced since then as well, and I think that was supposed to be on the road this year. I would need to go back and check that, but pretty sure that was supposed to be on the road by now. Also, not exactly missing in action because prototypes are still being seen, and Elon is still talking about it. I do get the feeling that the Roadster has been kind of backburnered for a little while, and possibly that's because it's predicated on the new battery architecture that they've been working on. And this is a positive story. This is like a really cool advancement in battery tech. So they're calling it a tabless architecture, and the new battery cells are of a new format. And I think I should have written this down. I think the new format is called 4680, and the previous one was like 11650 or something. I should have written these things down, but essentially what those numbers refer to is height and diameter of the battery cell.
Okay.
And for some reason on the 11650 they add an extra zero on the end. Nobody knows why, but it's like 11 millimeters by 6.5 millimeters, and the new one is 4.6 or something, or 46 millimeters by 65.
Oh, no, 600.
No, sorry, by 80. So yeah, there seems to be kind of flipping which dimensions where, but whatever. I don't think there's any kind of standardized format for these battery types to be written to. But in any case, the size of the cell is not super important, except in that it stacks well in the structure of the car. And what they're doing now is making the battery packs actually the base of the car, whereas before they were structural reinforcement in and of themselves when they were bolted into the car. Now the car is made of batteries on the bottom. So it's like you got the base plate to protect the batteries, and then you got the batteries slotted into place, and then they put like a resin in between the batteries, and that hardens up and it's super strong. Nice. So that's the new kind of philosophy behind it anyway. But the reason that this is important is because it's using what's called a tabless architecture. So with normal batteries, you have your anode and your cathode, which are two like sheets of chemicals of some description. I don't know, I'm not a chemist. And they have a insulator in between them. And then whatever way batteries work. Again, not a scientist. The insulator allows that to work, whatever. Those 3 layers are then rolled up on themselves like a Swiss roll cake. But in order for the electricity to get in at the positive and out at the negative, or whatever way that works, there have to be little tabs that stick out. And the tabs complicate the manufacturing process of batteries. So because you have to cut the sheet and then cut the piece between the 2 tabs at either end out. And that slows down the manufacturing process. So what Tesla have done is create a tabless architecture where they basically kind of fritter the edge of the sheets and then roll them up and fold those fritters down. And I don't get it, but supposedly this means, I think it's like that you can access the cell chemistry at more points along those sheets than you would do with just the tabs, which allows the electrons to diffuse more evenly and uniformly into the cell, and so they can charge and discharge more cleanly. The chemical reactions that happen and age and denature the batteries happen across the cell rather than in it, and they have various other there's like some kind of dry electrode process which limits the amount of corrosion that'll happen on the battery versus traditional batteries being a wet electrode, which is purely a manufacturing convenience, so that you can apply a paste in a, like from a robot arm that goes along the line of the thing, and then you roll it up. In this case, they're applying it dry, so there's less corrosion going to happen because of that. So there's all sorts of improvements in this, and the end benefit is you've got faster charging, faster discharging, so you can access the energy faster and get better oomph out of it. And you also have higher battery life density. For longer battery life.
Nice. So that seems logical. If you can access it more, and if you said that it won't corrode as much, that makes sense.
Overall longer battery life, but also larger battery capacity because there's higher energy density. And so that's what in theory is what enables performance as seen in the 2020 Roadster, because that is a smaller footprint of vehicle than your Model S Plaid. So how do you get the energy into that footprint to deliver this incredible, like I forgot to mention that the range that was claimed for the 2020 Roadster is like 600 kilometers in a single charge. And as Musk said at the time, that the goal of the Roadster was to just deliver a hardcore smackdown to internal combustion engines and just beat them in every respect, which they've soundly done already, really, with the Model S, even before the Plaid update. But that manufacturing process, because it's simplified, because you don't have machines to cut bits out of the rolled up whatever it is, you don't have the mixing tanks for the wet electrodes, and various other optimizations that have been made along the way with it. It reduces the footprint of your battery manufacturing facility. So they can put battery manufacturing facilities in existing factories and just plant them in their gigafactories. And indeed shrink the existing facilities that they have in the likes of the gigafactory out in Nevada. No, is it Reno? Yeah, Nevada. And give more space to manufacture cars and solar panels and all of that. So I think that's their biggest advantage in the coming years, because they'll just be technologically ahead of the game compared to other manufacturers. The Tesla is going to go a lot farther and charge a lot quicker than other competitors' cars. But it's also what's holding things up, because they're still working on perfecting that process and getting that working. It's also a massive advantage in that the boom of electric vehicles is driving a huge shortage in battery availability. And I was just consulting my notes, because Musk was talking in Germany yesterday at the gigafactory that they opened last year in Berlin.
Oh yeah, that's also new.
Yeah, indeed. So there's a Gigafactory. The original Gigafactory was built in Nevada. The original factory for Tesla is the Fremont production facility, which could now be regarded as a Gigafactory. I think it crossed that definition of like 1 million square feet or something, with some some expansion that they've done. And like when Tesla first started producing cars at Fremont, it was like the working area, the factory was all brightly lit, and then you could just walk into dark, empty space, and there was just absolute acres of factory floor that wasn't used or updated yet. Whereas now they've filled out that space and added more capacity there, and they're going to move away from it. Well, I think they'll keep some activity going there, but they'll move their headquartering to Austin. Anyway, he was talking in Berlin at the Gigafactory there about what the bottlenecks are for Tesla at the moment. And actually, battery production is not the most pressing bottleneck at the moment. The most pressing bottleneck is the global chip shortage.
Yeah.
Which is what people are probably noticing is driving up, certainly if they're upgrading their computers, graphics cards.
Yeah, that's end consumer level where people notice it. Yeah.
Yeah, graphics cards, phones, I think have become more expensive. And there's also just like a slowdown in the upgrading of, or the rollout of new products in those fields because of this. So that's going to be a challenge for them over the course of the next year. They are very vertically integrated, meaning that they have onboard or in-house manufacturing capability for chips and a lot of other elements. So in-house manufacturing capability for batteries and for chips are super important, but it is raw materials that is driving the chip shortage. So that's the
I have a question there regarding the batteries. Did all of this innovation come from the last year's battery day that they announced that they're going to change the way that they're manufacturing everything, the whole approach? Because I remember the slides and they were amazing. They basically reimagined how a factory works, operates, and how it produces.
Yeah, exactly right. That's where I got all this information from. It was a battery day last year.
Damn, we should have covered it last year, man.
Yeah, I know. And then there was AI Day as well, which was all about how their self-driving tech works, and that's one of the other things that has, sort of stained Tesla's reputation, is that Musk keeps on saying, and he has been saying since 2016, that by the end of the year, a Tesla will have driven on its own from LA to New York, or some variation of that claim. And he keeps saying that, full self-driving will be able to drive the car autonomously without any user interaction, and that drivers will be able to not pay attention safely. And by the end of the year, and it's always by the end of the year. And Musk is a demon for doing that all the time. He just keeps on coming out with claims like this, and to someone who doesn't study closely how the man thinks and how his companies perform, I think it probably just sounds like marketing PR bullshit.
Yeah.
And what he's actually doing is failing to take into account how it'll be perceived in that way, but trying to motivate the company and the workforce to actually achieve what he's claiming. And the other thing he's doing is that he came from, like, his main qualification, his degree is in physics. And so he's come from a physics background, and the first principles thinking of physics is how he thinks about everything. He applies that to everything in his life. And so he's looking at these problems like, okay, how can we manufacture a battery more efficiently? All right, let's come up with this design. And when he thinks about timelines, he tends to think of like, what is the minimum possible amount of time that this should take without breaking any laws of physics? And that's the time that he will tell you when you ask him how long something is going to take. He doesn't take into account regulatory approvals. He doesn't take into account manpower shortages, pandemics.
Setbacks.
Yeah,
black swan
no
events.
Setbacks.
Yeah,
exactly. So he's repeatedly said that he's trying to get better at his time projection skills, but he still makes claims like we're going to be full self-driving by the end of the year for like 5 years running. So
I think for a person in his position, it's better to stick to that actually, because it's doubling down and hammering down the vision. Like we want the car that drives itself from New York to LA, period. Right? If he said, maybe this year, maybe next year, everyone's like, I think it's better to do it his way.
I agree to a point. I totally understand why people are pissed off, because they were like, oh, in 2018, I'm going to get a car that can drive me anywhere without needing to pay attention. That's an awesome thing to think about for the future. And it's inspiring and all of that. And when it doesn't happen, it can get disappointing. I'm not one of those people. To me, I have always understood that the timelines that he projects are aspirational. They're literally the best possible timeline for this, given no road bumps at all. So, and I've also understood that he tends to think of things in kind of absolute terms, where he goes, can we do this? Probably. And if we can do this, how long is it going to take? And discount the kind of, well, again, I guess the road bumps, but stuff going wrong in the process, not necessarily external factors, and also the complexity of the problem. One of the things that physicists like to do is there's this joke phrase where it's like trying to figure out the physics of mass farm herds and stuff, and methane production and stuff, and they'll say something like, right, assume a spherical cow. so simplify your basic data points to the point where they are approximately correct. And I think that kind of thinking has probably shortened his estimations for how long self-driving is going to take, because there are no spherical cows and there are no perfect roads. There are no situations where every driver on the road is behaving perfectly. So there'll always be edge cases that the system is not going to be able to deal with. And it's about stamping those out. And it's about stamping those out without teaching the system bad habits in other situations as well, because it's all machine learning. And so it's not entirely clear why the machine is going to learn this, response to that situation. Exactly. So there's a lot of guardianship needed. But all that said, if you look at any of the videos of the self-drive beta testers that are out there, and there's thousands of them, tens of thousands, and the more the merrier as far as Tesla is concerned. It's all about data, like you said earlier.
With machine learning, the more data, the better it is. Yeah,
exactly. If you look at how those things are performing, it is really astonishing. Like the fact that it makes mistakes every now and again is mildly alarming, but the fact that it's able to do all that incredible driving in the meantime, and there's little stuff like they had to do. Tesla is still fighting against negative press all the time, wantonly negative press. Stuff like, I was scrolling through my newsfeed. I was like, recall affects 150,000 Tesla cars. And I was like, oh no, what's happened? I opened it up, and it was a slight change to the Tesla full self-drive AI in situations where it's waiting at a stoplight at a four-way junction with no other cars in sight. And if you have selected aggressive mode for how it handles its driving, then in those situations, it will creep forward while watching for other traffic until it's sure that there's definitely nothing coming, and then accelerate. And that extremely niche case, right? Might occur, 1 in 10,000 drives, but it was not endangering anybody. It was infringing or getting close to infringing, I think, a California driving code rule. And I'm all for, I am a bit of a stickler for the rules on the road, so I'm all for obeying the rules of the road. But this was solved with an over-the-air software patch that would happen overnight while your car is in the driveway. that was the recall that the news were getting all up. Yeah, Tesla recall affects 150,000 vehicles without inconveniencing anybody for a problem that cost 0 lives.
Yeah.
And
that's the media. They're just shooting for the ultra fear attention.
Yeah, but now there are things that have propped up in the media that look like it might be sensationalist, and yes, these incidents are extremely rare, but at the same time, there's merit to reporting them as a negative, because stuff like, for example, for a while there, self-driving Teslas, it's one of these cases where the machine learned something that it shouldn't have learned. They were colliding with emergency vehicles. I don't know the details of it, but there were multiple crashes where Teslas rear-ended fire trucks and ambulances, which is like, what the hell? What is going on in that thing's brain? So there's definitely cause for alarm in some situations like that. And that's why it's still a beta. That's why it's taking so long, because it's like an incredibly complex machine learning in a what do you call it, an opaque kind of way in an incredibly complex real world situation. And so it's gonna take a lot of refining, unfortunately.
Of course, it's gonna be in beta for a long time. Look, man, there's so many, as you said, so many variables, so many situations that it has to predict and adapt to. It'll just hard to know. But as far as I understand it, the most boring part of driving is like 5 hours on a freeway where it's basically just straight. And that's where it's actually the easiest to implement. So
absolutely. And that's why, like, the likes of Volvo and every other auto company with any kind of luxury range of cars, they have a system like that already set up where it's watching the lines and keeping its lane, and those work really, really well, and they're used all the time.
That's where I would use it a lot, like, because sometimes I love driving through, like small streets and driving it slowly, because you get more time to look around and kind of soak in the nature around you and things like that. But like highways, they just bore me out, man. Like after like 10 minutes, I'm just like, oh, this is annoying. Like it's cool the first part where you're accelerating and you're going faster and faster, and like, oh wow, now I'm driving fast, right? But then after a while, it's just like, I'm driving. I'm still driving really, really fast. Like
holding that 120 and watching other cars, and it can get like, I've often had to use the laybys on a highway because I'm like driving along and then I'm like, did I just micro sleep? I think I just micro sleeped. Where
it tracks your vision, right, where you're looking.
Well, I'm not talking about the machine there. I'm talking about me. I'm talking about me in my own car. That like, I have little moments where I'm like, I think I just slept for a moment there. Like I need to pull over, get some air, take a drink or something, of alcohol, obviously.
Don't drink and drive. Pull over, drink the alcohol, and then continue driving.
And then rip on out there.
The Uncle Gold podcast is not condoning the use of alcohol while driving.
and I am not either, just for clarity as well.
Just joking
the opinions and sentiments of all guests are their own, but not necessarily meant sincerely. That was a joke. Anyway, so you're right though. You bring up the eye tracking stuff. There are driver facing cameras in the Teslas and in lots of other cars now as well. And the idea is to do that kind of thing, to track driver awareness, to make sure that they're paying attention, and also to keep drivers safe. Like if somebody has a stroke or something, or passes out for any other reason, that the car can respond to that. Now, there are already facilities in the self-drive model where because it has these like nagging prompts to like keep your hand on the wheel, make sure you're paying attention to what it's doing in case it fucks up. And if it doesn't detect an input from the driver for an extended period of time, and the driver doesn't respond to the increasingly nagging prompts and alarms that it gives, it'll turn on the indicators and pull over to the side of the road and slow down. It's not just going to keep going on its own.
Yeah, that can save someone's life, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But then again, I also see like somebody having their phone with them and like looking down on their phone all the time, and then it starts beeping, and somebody requesting the option to turn it off, right?
Yeah.
Because it's beeping too much.
It's beeping too much when I'm not paying attention.
Yeah. Like, why is your car beeping? Well, oh well, humans, right?
So I was going to mention the fact that they have sold so far in total 1.9 million cars.
Wow.
And that's a sharp ramp up. Like last year they sold just shy of 500,000. It was like 499,832 or something. And this year so far, and we're in, what is this, the end of March, they have sold 300,000 cars this year. The Model 3, Tesla Model 3 is the best-selling electric vehicle in the world.
Nice.
From any brand. And it's way up there on like overall car sales globally as well.
Compared to regular combustion.
Yeah.
Nice.
Which is impressive. They employ 70,000 people worldwide. And yeah, I think we covered how many gigafactories they have. But yeah, they're going gangbusters, basically. They need to tighten up on their customer support and be a little bit more realistic, or at least dampen expectations when they announce some new awesome thing. Oh, and we haven't even talked about the Tesla bot thing that they talked about on AI Day.
Man, like, I wanted to do like a whole episode on that one, because let's not even go into that, because our imaginations and that will kind of exceed the parameters of this episode. But definitely we can do that next time. Next time, just like Tesla bot.
Turns out Mate Rimac never actually met Elon Musk. It was just a prototype Tesla bot. Bot in a Musk skin.
Elon Musk built himself a bot looking like Mate Rimac. Like, we finally met.
and like posted Rimac a Neuralink prototype to like pop in, and that's why he was like, well, that was interesting and intense. Didn't expect to have to get skull surgery to experience a meeting with Musk.
Imagine it being the other way around, like Mate managed to build a bot like Elon Musk, being like, we finally met.
That raises way too many questions. You're right, this should be its own.
See, this is like, let's not get it started with that. I would rather hear what's going on with SpaceX, if you have any updates on that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, SpaceX is another thing that I could fill an episode with again, but okay, this is as
are we on Mars yet, Brendan? Where's the holdup?
So yeah, where's the holdup? That's a good place to start. So last time we talked about SpaceX, they had built they built many prototypes for the Starship rocket. This is the super large vehicle that 9-meter diameter, approximately 120 meters tall. It keeps on changing a little bit all the time. Just they keep optimizing it and improving it. And we had, I think the last time we were talking, they had done the first stacking, or maybe they hadn't. The first stacking of a full stack, so that being the super heavy booster and the Starship itself on top. So it's a confusing naming scheme. The whole system overall is called Starship, but on Earth only, you need an extra kick to get off the ground, because Earth has the essentially the highest gravity of any rocky planet in the solar system.
Yeah.
And it also has a thick atmosphere, which provides resistance on the way up. So you need an extra bit of oomph to get out of Earth's atmosphere and get into orbit. On any other world, with the exception of Venus,
you could just toss it. You could just feck it off the field.
Yeah, you could feck it up the field using the engines on the Starship spacecraft itself. But so on Earth, we need a booster, and that is called Super Heavy, which is also a confusing name. SpaceX are very bad at names. And yeah, I could go into that at length, but yeah. So booster number 4 was all ready and built and set up, and it was put on the brand new orbital launch pad, which they have put together over the last, like, I think it took about 6 months from empty field to orbital launch pad with crazy new stacking system, which is this like pair of arms that they call chopsticks that lever in and out. And not only does that put the rocket together on the pad, but also when the mission is accomplished and the booster comes back, it grabs the booster, puts it back on the pad. Then the spacecraft comes back later, grabs the spacecraft, puts that on top of the rocket again. They refuel everything, go off again. So it's this like insane contraption. And all of that put together more or less the last time they stacked it with the crane. The chopsticks weren't ready at that point. But yeah, and then they took it apart again. And like there was a photo op and it was like really cool. They tested a bunch of systems, but they had to take it apart again because the ship wasn't completely finished and there were some other upgrades to make. And they didn't have a launch date in mind because when the site that they're working in, which is called recently rechristened Starbase, it's now called Starbase, the city of Starbase, Texas, was formerly Boca Chica Village, where they set up their build site and their testing launch sites and stuff. It's all down there on the very southern tip of Texas, right north of the Mexican border. Like they can spit and hit Mexico from there. And as such, there was concern that Trump's border wall was actually going to be constructed right through the campus of SpaceX. It's literally, there was planning permission requests made for that. But anyway, that's a digression. So they stacked the ship on top of the booster. They did their checks and that, and then the launch date for all of that was expected to be relatively soon. Sorry, I have a co-star buzzing around me here.
Unexpected guest.
Yeah, exactly. And then it emerged that the Federal Aviation Commission was doing a new environmental impact statement for the area because it is protected coastline and wetlands. There's a lot of wildlife around the area. And the same is true in Florida of the Cape Canaveral site. That's actually like the fact that there's a launch facility there has kept development from occurring on that land because you need a lot of space around these launch pads clear of anybody because of the noise and everything.
You don't want a rocket landing in your backyard.
Essentially, yeah. And that's great for Florida because they get a wildlife reserve out of that. I mean, the wildlife has to put up with the occasional thunderous roar from a rocket taking off or landing, but aside from that, they have a great environment. And the same is true in the region of Boca Chica. And so originally when SpaceX bought the land there, they bought the land with the intention of initially launching Falcons and Falcon Heavies. Falcon is the in air quotes, smaller rocket in SpaceX's line right now. That one is a 3.6 meter diameter rocket, which is still quite sizable. It's the Falcon Heavy is the one that launched the car we were talking about earlier into orbit around the sun, and has done over 100 missions, well over 100 missions. They've actually landed the rocket, the first stage booster. And this is something that's become super routine, but nobody ever landed a booster rocket before the end of 2015. And SpaceX put down their orbital booster rocket for the Orbcomm 2 mission onto the landing pad at Cape Canaveral, and everybody who was watching it absolutely lost their mind, including
just to clear up, that's the part that usually breaks off and doesn't finish the mission, right, and falls into the ocean.
Yeah, so the booster rocket, as I said, on Earth, you need an extra bit of oomph, and that's true for pretty much every launch vehicle. So you get a large fuel tank, essentially, and a bunch of powerful engines to push the rest of the rocket through the atmosphere and get it up into space. And traditionally, that large fuel tank and bunch of expensive engines were then snapped off the upper stage of the rocket so that they're not hauling that dead weight with them, and let plummet back into the ocean. And this was true of all of the Apollo rockets. It was true of the big orange tank on the space shuttle, and basically any rocket you can think of, that was how it was done. And there was an idea out there. I've seen like concept art from back in the Apollo days when they were thinking about that huge arse on the Saturn V, that big 10-meter diameter bottom of it, that they would unfurl the largest parachute ever conceived, have that thing slow down as it fell back into the atmosphere, and then get the largest helicopter ever conceived to snag it and bring it back to land and drop it again. Not really doable with 1960s technology. Debatable as to whether it will be doable with modern technology. But SpaceX's solution to that was absolute genius. It was, we've got a rocket. Why don't we use the rocket to land the rocket? And so they just point the engines at the ground, and as it falls back to Earth, and in particular with the Falcon 9, the engines on it, there's 9 engines on the bottom of the Falcon 9, which is where it got its name.
Nice.
Each one of those engines is too powerful to be able to hover the rocket, which is to say, if it's falling downwards toward the ground and you shoot the engines toward the ground, it will slow down, stop, and if you don't turn off the engine, it will start rising again because the engine cannot throttle down low enough to hover.
Okay.
Because if you try to, the engine will explode. It gets unstable and blows up. So they had to have an extremely precisely timed engine burn that happens at just the right moment so that when it hits that zero velocity point, it is at zero height. So they call that the suicide burn. So, and that's part of what makes it so bloody exciting to watch this happen, is that it's like down to the wire as to whether it's going to actually survive the landing. But they have, like, they did that first landing back on December 21st, 2015. It was about 4:30 in the morning, and I screamed in joy and nearly passed out from how deliriously happy I was that it was happening. Because to me, that was the culmination of all of SpaceX's kind of high-minded ideas and projections for the future and these crazy thoughts about colonizing Mars. It's all predicated on, can you do this thing that's never been done before that will lower the cost of access to space by such a huge amount? Because you don't have to buy or pay for the construction of a new rocket every single time you want to go to space. So they did that one, and then the next one failed to land, and then the next one landed okay, but one of the landing legs didn't lock and it fell over and blew up.
I remember that one, yeah.
And then, so there were quite a few failures, and in April 2016, the one in December, it landed on a concrete landing pad at Cape Canaveral. And in order to get back there, the rocket has to first turn itself around, cancel out all of its sideways velocity, because a lot of people think going to space, you just go up and then somehow you stay there. But no, if you go up and turn off the engines, you're going to fall back down. So in order to get into orbit, you need to go sideways and be going fast enough that when you fall back down, the Earth is actually curved away under you with the curvature of the Earth. And so your fall just keeps on turning you, and you end up falling around the planet. And that's what an orbit is. Because there's no air resistance up there, you don't lose speed from that. So you just keep falling around the planet. That's all that orbit is. It's falling with style.
Falling in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Nice.
Falling and missing the ground, as Douglas Adams put it. It's a really good way to put it. You fall and miss the ground. That's orbit. I love that. But anyway, so because you need to go very quickly sideways, and because your booster stage has assisted you with a lot of that sideways velocity, it's now when you separate the upper stage, and by the way, the upper stage has an engine on it, and it goes on to orbit and delivers the payload to wherever it's supposed to go. But that booster rocket is now separated, and it's now flying sideways away from where it came from, with no power on it. And if you reserve a little bit of fuel in that, you can flip the booster around, fire the engines towards your direction of motion, so hitting the brakes with the engines, and then you can reduce your velocity in that direction. And if you like map out the projected trajectory, say that 10 times fast, ahead of yourself, you'll kind of see that when it separates, it's not at orbital speed, so that the arc of that trajectory will head towards the ocean. And with a traditional rocket, that's the arc it would follow. If you then keep that projection live as you turn the rocket around and fire the engines to brake it, that arc starts to shrink until the impact point is directly below the rocket, and then it flips around and the impact point starts to go back along the course towards where the rocket came from. So that's called the boost back burn. And that is just awesome to see, especially if a launch occurs at sunset or shortly after sunset. You get this effect where the rocket and the gas it's spewing out into the vacuum of space are above the shadow of the Earth, so they're getting the sunlight, and you get this ghostly kind of jellyfish effect. If you search for SpaceX Jellyfish, you'll see all these beautiful imagery, and videos in particular are just amazing. The first few times it happened, it freaked people out because they thought it was like some kind of portal into another dimension or something.
Yeah, I've seen it. Aliens, conspiracy theorists went happy. Yeah.
I remember the first few times it happened over LA in particular, because they launch out of a launch site north of LA called Vandenberg Air Force Base. And when they do that, they're typically aiming for a polar orbit, which means going south along the coast. So they go right past LA. And the first few times that happened, there was just like social media saturation of all these videos of people going, "Oh my God, is that North Korea?" They thought it was like a nuclear explosion in the upper atmosphere or something. But it looks absolutely stunningly beautiful.
Yeah,
and you can see.
I only saw the ones about aliens attacking us and where did they land, like.
But you can see in that jellyfish, there'll be smaller puffs that are going off and like expanding out like little brackets or ripples. And that's the maneuvering thrusters on the rocket orienting it to turn it around. And then you'll see that it like lights up a big, and a new cloud will erupt out of it. And that's it doing its boost back burn. So although the videos from LA, they didn't typically do a boost back burn. But anyway, so you have two options. You can do the boost back burn, and that will send you back towards the launch site that you came from, or that the rocket stage came from. And then you do another little turnaround. You have another tiny little bit of fuel left, and you can do your suicide burn just as you. I'm skipping over the entry burn. That's just to prevent it burning up. It's a little more technical, but basically it needs to slow down a little bit so the atmosphere itself doesn't kill the rocket.
Yeah.
So it does a little boost back, or a little entry burn as it hits the top of the atmosphere. And then as it gets close to land, it does that precisely timed suicide burn to land with zero velocity at 0 meters on the landing pad. And it's so beautiful because it's this 16-story tall, essentially an office building that's just falling out of the sky, and then it lights this rocket and it touches down as gently as a ballet dancer, doing a little jump. It's gorgeous. So that's option one. But in order to do that, you need to reserve enough fuel for the boost back burn, the entry burn, and the landing burn. And so you don't have as much fuel to push the payload uphill in the first place. So you need to place more limits on how much payload you can deliver. If your payload is heavier and you can't reserve that much fuel, then you can eliminate the boost back burn and follow that trajectory down to the sea. Just do the entry burn to prevent you from burning up, and do a landing burn. But you will land in the water. So SpaceX have a fleet of what they're calling autonomous spaceport drone ships, which are robot barges, essentially, with engines strapped to them and a big flat landing deck. And they just put them bobbing out in the water, and the rockets do essentially the same thing, a suicide burn down onto the deck of this drone ship, and then they go back to port, and the rockets get unloaded and brought back home. And it's nuts. First time.
Sorry, explain again, why can't in that version it land on land?
So it's essentially because turning around and braking that sideways speed and then reversing course and heading home costs a lot more fuel.
Ah,
So if you have a payload that is heavier than the fuel margins allow for, you can't do that boost backburn because you need enough fuel to get the payload up to where it's going.
that's the part that I didn't get. So when you lift off, you don't go straight up, so you can fall straight down. You go,
yeah.
So you have to return back.
You always have to go sideways with the rocket launch
yeah.
in order to get that orbital speed, unless you're doing like a sounding rocket, which is, it's just straight up and down. But
Yeah.
you don't get big rockets like Falcon 9's doing that.
All right, now I got it. Cool.
But yeah, why am I talking about that? I guess I'm talking about how awesome that is, and they have done that now. As I said, they had the first successful landing. That was after like probably 10 attempts where it had hit the deck of the drone ship and blown up, or fallen over or whatever. And then there were a few more failures after that, but the rate of successes started to uptick, and then the failures were the rarities. And now it's been like 100+ successful landings of boosters, and it's the most everyday thing, and it's like almost a boring thing, like that a SpaceX
people take it for granted. Like self-driving cars, they're like, oh yeah, it just drives itself on the highway.
Well, that will be the case soon, I'm sure, but it's kind of mad to think that nearly 7 years after the first booster landed, no other company, no other rocket provider is able to do that. SpaceX are still the only people who do that, and they do it like it's nothing. It's totally routine. And now Starship is coming along with its super heavy booster. They'll be doing the same thing. They'll be landing the Starships as well in the similar manner. It's kind of interesting and cool. Like, there's so much detail and engineering thought that goes into all of these things that, like, I can pick any aspect of them, like the way the Starship falls through the atmosphere like a skydiver, using these flaps in place of arms and legs to like balance itself as it falls, and then it kicks over and lands on its base. Yeah,
crazy.
Anyway, point is, I was talking about the environmental review. So originally, where Starship is being built was set up, or at least was spec'd out for the environmental review as a Falcon and Falcon Heavy launch site. But Starship is a lot bigger, where a Falcon is 3.6 meter diameter and has 9 engines, and a Falcon Heavy is just 3 of those strapped together, so it's 27 engines, but it's also 3.6 meter diameter. And those are not the same engines as on Starship. They're significantly less powerful. Starship is a 9 meter diameter with, I think at last count, 31 engines on the 30, or is it 33? It keeps changing because they're very, very flexible in their development path, so they keep changing things. So it's somewhere between 29 and 33 engines on the bottom of a single stick Starship. And those engines are like 3 or 4 times as powerful as the engines on the Falcon 9. So individually, each engine. So that's a whole lot more force and noise and power that's being that the local environment is being subjected to.
Yeah.
So for that reason, quite correctly, the Federal Aviation Administration said the environmental review you have on this site is invalid for this rocket, so we need to redo it. But irritatingly, they said we'll have it done by January, when it was first started, I think in September last year. And it was around August time that first stacking of the Starship was done. And that was booster number 4 and Starship number 20. So we were waiting for an orbital flight 420 hashtag flight 420, and like Elon Musk was like, I don't know why these numbers keep following me around. And he's like, you know what, I just found out today that the engineering crew on the booster took half a ring off, half like a ring of steel for the 9 meter diameter, half a ring off it, and where the booster would be 70 meters tall, according to the spec it was going to be built to.
Okay.
It's now 69 meters tall. 69 420.
69 for 20. Yeah.
Yeah.
The magical number. Oh, man.
So we have been waiting for, like, what is it now? 5 months for flight 420 to take off. And in those 5 months, like I said, they keep iterating on the design, keep improving things, keep finding efficiencies. Booster 4 and Ship 20 are obsolete now. So they're not going to make the flight. RIP
No.
flight 420. So it's probably going to be like Booster 7 and Ship 25, which is just 725, whatever.
Yeah. I'm sure there's a
SpaceX
radio
have
station
never-
somewhere. I'm sure there's a radio station somewhere like 725, and they like have 30 years of history, and we just like destroy them. We're like, nah.
Yeah,
But okay.
So that's where SpaceX stands. Not even covering Starlink. That's going really, really well. They have very good global coverage of the internet satellites.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of consternation among the astronomical community about them initially, because they were very visible in the sky and they would interfere with astronomical long exposure photographs. SpaceX have been working with the astronomical community to fix that. And so they have little black flaps that kind of deflect the sun or shade the shiniest parts of the satellites from the sun, which massively reduces how visible they are. And when they are ascending to their on-orbit station, they have changed the orientation that the satellites go into when they're ascending up to their orbit.
So they don't reflect it.
Reflections.
Yeah, nice.
Exactly.
How powerful of a telescope would you have to see one of the Starlink satellites?
You probably need to go with a Mark 1 eyeball. For
course.
I will say, when they're initially launched and they're still separating, because they launched them as a stack of like 60. It's like getting a deck of playing cards, although they're slightly thicker, so they're like tall. And then they take the rocket, the upper stage of the rocket, which has brought them into orbit. And once they're ready to release, they just turn it gently and let go. And they let go of all the satellites, like the straps essentially come off. And it's just like a slow motion card dealer throwing a deck of cards across the table. They spread out really neatly. Nice. And they take a couple of days to like spread out completely. So if you're lucky, you can catch a post-deployment batch of between 40 and 60 Starlinks spreading out as this like glittering stream in the sky shortly after sunset, if it just happens to pass over. I've seen it myself once, and it was absolutely mind-boggling. It looked like a sword in the sky. It was incredible. But that was way more visible before they implemented all of these fixes to kind of make it more astronomy friendly. You will still see it in the first day or two after launch, but after that, the satellites wake up, they turn themselves around, they do the orientation, they put out the flaps, and you can't see them anymore. In terms of how powerful a telescope, if you were looking for them, just a regular old backyard telescope, you'd probably find them, as long as they're sunlit. You know, if the conditions are right, etc. And so they do still cause issues for astronomers, because you do still get a streak going through the imagery, but it's less pronounced now. And other things that SpaceX have done is, or at least said they'd do, I don't know that this has actually come to fruition, but they were talking about producing some kind of software, perhaps a plugin for the software that astronomers use to manage their what would be time-lapse photography, but it's long exposure photography. So in order to get detail on distant nebulae or galaxies, you leave the camera aperture open and let it just soak in the light. And because the Earth is turning, everything will smear out if you don't have some piece of equipment. So they have what are called equatorial mounts for the telescopes that just match the rotation of the Earth and keep the target.
So it's always kind of steady in place.
And so doing that, they can drink in all of the light and get loads of detail on the astronomical object they're looking at. But if a satellite does pass through that field of view during that, there will be a streak across the photograph.
Yeah.
Just painted by the light of that one satellite. So what SpaceX were talking about doing was having software or a plug-in for stacking software that is aware of where all the Starlink satellites are. It's regularly updated and will simply stop stacking while a Starlink is passing through the field of view. And that's a nice one.
Yeah,
they're also talking about building a ridiculously large telescope or a fleet of ridiculously large telescopes at very low cost that they will essentially just build into the hull of a Starship and just send up a bunch of dedicated telescope starships that just pop the end off and you have a massive telescope in orbit, and just make them available to the astronomical community for, I don't know what kind of cost, if any.
Yeah,
but
that might
just
be.
as a kind of a sorry for ruining your photographs thing, here, have this.
Elon photobombing the astronomical communicator. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you there with the satellites there, with this whole Ukraine thing that happened between Ukraine and Russia, there was a famous tweet sent out to Elon Musk, like, can you give us internet? Because supposedly internet failed in Ukraine during the military operation. Did Elon actually give them a satellite over Ukraine and provide internet? Like, did that happen?
So satellite was already there, but what he did was he sent them like there's thousands of Starlink satellites, so there's probably a couple dozen over our heads right now, and that would be true pretty much anywhere on the Earth, including the poles now, because they've done a lot of polar orbit launches. So you've got most of the satellites orbiting on this kind of plane where it's like 52 degrees inclined to the horizon, but then to cover the poles they have a number of planes that are like 70, 80, 90 degrees to the horizon.
Okay.
So the whole Earth is covered with satellite, with Starlink coverage now, and Starlink is available as an internet service provider in most countries. But what he did for Ukraine was send them over trucks and trucks and trucks of free ground stations, and he had the software guys modify the ground stations so that they could run in reduced power modes off a cigarette lighter in a car, and enable a feature that had been experimental in-house testing, which is mobile ground stations. So commercially available Starlink ground stations are meant to be used in fixed locations, so you can't move them essentially.
Yeah, like for your house or apartment.
Exactly,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what he did was he enabled it so you can run it off a car cigarette lighter and it can keep running while you're moving. So it can work on vehicles.
Awesome.
So yeah, it was a super awesome move, and from what I've seen, very, very appreciated by the people of Ukraine. Horrible situation that they're in.
Yeah, amazing that he did that. I think that's the power of technology. You know, like it can jump into places of need where you, like 50 years ago, wouldn't have a chance to do something like that. You know.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to see more and more of these, where well, hopefully not wars and military operations, but good use cases for technology. That's where I'm hoping that this is going. You know, that like places that would never be able to go and have a stable internet connection now for a very reasonable price could have it, which would eventually lead to more education, more job opportunities, raising the economy, you know, and just make the world a better place.
And I mean, it's most of the detraction about Starlink has come from the astronomical community. I think pretty much nobody else has a problem with it. And I am a hobbyist astronomer. That's my telescope there. But I'm not serious enough into it for it to actually irritate me in terms of getting streaks in my photographs. However, even if I was, I think the trade-off of having this global access to the internet, and also, you know, ideologically for me, the fact that the revenue from Starlink is funding the Mars effort for SpaceX, which is what Starship is for.
Yeah.
That makes it all worthwhile in my book. Now, that said, I haven't signed up to Starlink because it's pretty expensive. It's like $90 a month and $500 for the hardware. I'm hoping that will come down a bit because I really do want to jump on board. It's it's pretty damn good internet connection, and
it's
really cool.
Yeah. I've seen the devices that they send. They look really like futuristic, spacey. So I like that part as always.
And it's like 250 megs per second. It's between 150 to 250 megs per second, depending on which, because they're, as with anything SpaceX, they're improving the satellites with every launch. So the newer ones are capable of better throughput. And I think ping times were being measured with like pinging New York from LA through the Starlink network at like 25 milliseconds. So not bad at all. And theoretically, the ping times between locations on opposite sides of the world should be better through Starlink than they would be through ground infrastructure.
Yeah, cable.
Because the cables have to skirt the continents, and electrons don't travel through the metal wires at exactly the speed of light. There's a slight reduction in speed because of electrons getting absorbed and re-emitted by every molecule along the way. It's a very, very slight overhead, but it's there, so that adds to the ping times. Whereas with the satellites, they have laser links between them.
Yeah,
so it's literally light.
Could directly see it. Yeah,
and they can follow the path of shortest connections rather than skirting the continents.
Nice. We're getting some massive technological advances. Sorry, it's getting late. My speaking skills are dropping in orders of magnitude.
Tremendous.
Yeah. Let's end the episode with one rumor that I've heard, and I'm not sure if that's real or just like fan based, but when Elon was opening the Gigafactory in Berlin, to adhere to the fans, he said that they're going to actually make beer in the Gigafactory Berlin. Is that a truth or myth, or just like a marketing stunt?
I wish I could tell you. I don't know. I hadn't heard about that actually.
Really?
What I thought you were gonna talk about was that they built a techno club in the Gigafactory in Berlin, which is true. There's a techno club upstairs, and they have parties like when stuff goes well for them. The opening was a techno rave, so that part's true, and it would make sense that they're making beer there as well. But I don't know.
I'm sending you a link and we'll put pictures up here for everyone on the YouTube channel of a concept that he unveiled actually in the presentation when he was hyping the beer factory, not the beer, but the Gigafactory.
The beer factory that also makes cars. I heard a rumor that they're going to make cars in this beer factory.
German people like, really? So that would be a cool thing. I asked that because as the internet router, so does the beer can or bottle or pack, whatever that is, looks very like alien like.
Cyber beer. Oh, I did not hear about this.
Right? Dude, this is like gold. And then
inside EVs is a reliable source for this kind of information. So yeah, if they say that's happening. That's a really cool can design. I love it.
Okay. I have one more question there for the end of the podcast, which is also a rumor. I kind of hope that you're kind of following all these stories on Reddit. I'm surprised that you didn't know this about the beer. I thought you were gonna be like, yeah, we're definitely gonna try that. We're gonna buy a box of it. And
with all the kind of negativity that I was talking about and how Tesla's been regarded these days, I kind of fallen out of touch with Tesla. I just kind of stopped listening to it. But go on. What's the next thing?
All right, next rumor. Tesla is going to build their own phone.
That I think came out of nowhere and is nonsense. I think now stranger things have happened. Maybe it did come out of nowhere and is nonsense, but will motivate them to actually do it. I don't see why they couldn't. They're building super awesome cars. They're making their own chips. They're building a robot.
Like, think about it. They have in-house chips, advanced level of technology, AI, internet connectivity, right? Like there's no reason not to.
The one thing that makes me doubt it the main thing that makes me doubt it anyway is that Musk is always about finding an industry that needs disruption. And I don't think he thinks phones need disruption.
Okay.
He's always very complimentary about the design and capabilities of iPhones, not necessarily complimentary about the company that makes them. But he seems to really like the way phones work now.
Yeah.
And aside from stuff like Neuralink, which will disrupt that area because you'll be able to like think things to your phone, or indeed have your phone in your head rather than an external device. I think that's the way he'll disrupt it. I really doubt that there's any truth to that Tesla phone story. But aside from a cursory glance, when I started seeing it in my newsfeed, I didn't look into it any deeper than that.
Yeah, the idea was that they're going to use their battery technology to create a phone that would outlast all the other phones on the market. That they could make it super slick, thin, and get the stats up ultra high. Plus, since Elon is always joking about cryptocurrency, everybody said that they're going to have a built-in Dogecoin miner into your phone. So you're kind of, while using your phone, you're gonna earn Dogecoin currencies.
All quite interesting and on the surface level plausible, but I do think that the battery advances that they've been making are not in that form factor. And I think form factor is so important to the battery advances that they're making. I'll be happy to be proven wrong, but I don't think they're going to do that.
Yeah. Well, anyways, we'll see. We'll let ourselves be surprised by everything that comes towards us, right?
Absolutely.
Perfect. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching the episode. Make sure to watch the previous ones where we dive in deeper into other topics, and definitely stick around, subscribe to the channel. We're going to talk about some really cool topics there. Me and Brendan made a huge list of ideas that we want to run through. We mentioned some of them in this podcast already. Also check out the Uncle Gold podcast clips where we cut out the best parts. And Brendan, anything for the end?
I suppose check out makermeet.ie. I didn't talk about it, but that's the company I work with, and they are doing all sorts of fun educational STEAM, that's science, technology, engineering, arts, and maths based workshops, either in person or online. We're working on getting a web store up and running, which will be selling some of my 3D printed designs and other cool stuff as well. Excuse me. If you've got a young person in your life who's into engineering, they might be really interested in that. So makermeet.ie. I really am not a social media person, so I don't have a lot going on that side of things. But if you want to catch me on Twitter, I'm at Destructor111.
Cool. Awesome. Brendan, thanks for joining me again. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye. The Uncle Gold Podcast.